Mic's done. Chair, if you wish to start. Yeah, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. It's the 13th of December and it's the meeting of the Young Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny Panel, 13th of December. Good morning to everybody. Item 1 on the agenda. Have we any apologies for absence? We've got Councillor Jones and Councillor Saunders. Can we note them? Anybody else? None?
Oh, Chair.
Okay. Can we take a note of them, please? Do we have any declarations of interest? Item 2.
It's Alma Hilawi, Councillor. I'm a governor on 3 schools, Virtual School, Berwick Hill School and Newport Primary School in the town. Thank you.
Okay, can we take a note of them, please? Thank you. Can we approve the minutes of the last meeting, item 3? No dissent, so we take that as approved. Okay, approved. Item 4. At today's meeting, the scrutiny panel receive information on the topic of SEND, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. On the 23rd of November, myself and the Vice Chair were invited as guests to attend the Parents for Change meeting. This was at the end of their normal meeting. It was more of an introduction to see how they progress through their work they do with the young children and their needs. It was very informative, and it was quite interesting what these people do. And we have some more information on that from Carolyn, who was going to take this forward. So over to you, Carolyn. And if you would like to give us an update on that meeting, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Emma, sorry, I'm going to ask you if you will share the presentation. So thanks very much again for inviting us to the meeting. We are focusing on co-production for this meeting. And there was, as you said, a meeting with Parents for Change to talk about how they're involved in terms of developing services across the local area, and it was a very informative meeting. I've also shared a detailed report in terms of co-production across the local area, which you've all had sight of, and there's lots of information within that report that talks about the work that we do with our families and young people. Also within that report, there's a link to a video, which I hope you've all seen, and that video is on our local offer. And that video has been produced in partnership with our Parents Forum, with other parents and with young people, and it talks about the support that's available across the local area and the impact of that support. And we will be producing another video, probably in March sometime, which we will again put on the local offer, and that video will talk further about the work that's happening across the local area for our parents and young people. So there's been lots of examples of co-production, a lot of examples in the report in terms of the work with our Parents for Change forum and the impact of that work. And in previous meetings, we've talked about co-production with our families in terms of the development of the local offer, the development of the neurodevelopment pathways, our autism provision. At the last meeting, we focused on early years and the development of the early years service, again in partnership with our families. So we've given lots of examples. And today, as part of this presentation, which is a shorter presentation than normal, is we want to focus on the Education, Health and Care Plan process and how our families have been involved in shaping that process, in particular our Parents for Change forum, and then the impact of that process. So that's what we're going to focus on in terms of this presentation. All the information, as I said, is in the report, and it's also in the notes from the meeting with Parents for Change. So Emma, do you want to go to the full slideshow? Thank you. We can move to the next slide, Emma. Thank you. So really, again, it's as I said, this is focusing on co-production, and we've given lots of information around co-production and the importance of co-production as part of the SEND Code of Practice. And as a local authority, we must have regard to a series of core principles as outlined within the Code of Practice, and that's the views, wishes and feels of the child, young person and the child's parents. The importance of the child and young person and the child's parents participating as fully as possible in decisions and being provided with the information and support necessary to enable participation in those decisions, and the need to support the child and young person and the child's parents in order to facilitate the development of the child and young person to help them achieve the best possible educational and other outcomes and preparing them to effectively prepare for adulthood. So all of that work will centre around the education, health and care plan process, the developments across the local area, and really taking into account the views, wishes of the young person and the families. So that is at the centre of the process, and we'll hear a bit more about the education, health and care plan process in this presentation. Do you want to go to the next slide, Emma, please? So effective co-production enables young people, parents and or carers and professionals across multi-agencies and sectors to work together as equal partners to design, plan and deliver and review support and services in order to achieve shared outcomes. So our parents, we do see our parents and our young people as equal partners in terms of designing the provision and support that they need, and it's very much at the core of the Sound Code of Practice. Do you want to go to the next slide, please, Emma? Thank you. So again, this is outlined in the report, and we had this from our meeting with Parents for Change around co-production within Middlesbrough and the work that people, our families are involved in. So prior to the implementation of the Sound Code of Practice, we knew what the Sound Code of Practice was going to say, and we had a lot of work to do to implement the Sound Code of Practice within the local area. So before it was implemented, we set up a number of themed working groups, very much in partnership with our parents, particularly our Parents for Change, our Parents Forum, to look at how we could implement the Code of Practice. One of the key areas was around the education, health and care plan process and how we wanted to work within the local area. We've done a lot of work with our families around the SEND strategy and understanding the priorities. And again, we heard about that when we met with Parents for Change a couple of weeks ago. And not just making sure we've got the right priorities within the SEND strategy, but the document is an accessible document. And again, if you haven't seen the video, please go on to the video, which is on the local offer. And as I said, we will be producing another video, which will go on to the local offer early next year. We work very closely with our families to gain feedback from them in terms of how things are going within the local area, how the education, health and care plan process has gone, how services are being developed, what's their thoughts around those services, how they can be involved in a range of developments. So we work with them to get their views and consult with them in terms of key developments. We've talked a lot about our Parents Carers Forum, Parents for Change, and how strong they are within the local area to drive forward change, really taking and sharing the views of other families. We've recently set up a parent partnership group within the local area, and that's parents who are involved in other groups across Middlesbrough and who are linked to other services. And that group is currently looking at how we can improve the understanding of the education, health and care plan process for some families. We work very closely with our Parents Forum and our young people to implement and deliver conferences across the local area. And at those conferences, we look at key areas for development. So we might look at running some workshops around the local offer, the education, health and care plan process, services within health, services within social care, etc. And we use all that information to then reshape some of those services and to encourage new parents and other parents to take part in many of the work streams or task groups that are ongoing within the local area. And we'll be, I think I said, for the conferences in March next year, hopefully, depending on where we are with COVID. We run a number of focus groups, so we might undertake key pieces of work with our families, but then we run further focus group to get more feedback from our families around those pieces of work and to see what else we need to change. And that links into key pieces of project work. So again, we talked about our development around the neurodevelopment pathway in one of the recent scrutiny panels, and the autism work, the local offer, our post-16, our early years, etc. And recently, our young people within the local area have been very involved in the big takeover. So we've been working with a group of young people from Priory Wood Special School who have taken on the task of looking at how we can encourage more young people to participate or be present within their education, health and care plan pathway or annual review process. So we've got a lot of young people who do come to those meetings, but some young people or children, young people who don't come to the meetings. So Priory Woods young people, as part of the big takeover, are really looking at how we can encourage more young people to come to those meetings. Thank you, Emma. Do you want to move to the next slide? So I'm just going to hand over now to Emma, who's really going to take us through the education, health and care plan process so that you understand that in more detail, because that is very much at the heart of co-production. Sometimes that's overlooked in terms of co-production when we're thinking about the SEN Code of Practice. So I'll hand over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Caroline. And as Caroline said, this is really important, the education, health and care plan process, because often it's the first contact that many families have with statutory level services for education, health and care plans. So we feel that having co-production at the heart of that process allows that relationship with families to build from the very earliest point. So we make sure as part of the process that children, young people and their families are included from the start. And we do that by working with schools to make sure that families are fully informed when a referral for an education, health and care plan is going to be made. And there is recommendations and guidance made to schools to hold what's called a referral planning meeting. So that involves inviting parents along to discuss with the full range of practitioners that work with their child what the child's needs may be, what the benefit of a referral for an education, health and care assessment may be, and what that means in terms of the process. So from the very beginning, we are making sure that families are informed and are included in decision making around their child. Once an assessment is underway and has been completed, we make sure that families are invited to what's called a summary assessment meeting. And at that meeting, we share all of the information that we've gleaned about the child. So often there are a lot of reports that are produced with a lot of jargon in, or lots of information about the child in quite a medical or professional context. So that summary assessment meeting is a real opportunity to make sure that parents fully understand what that information means, what has been understood from the assessment, and we start then to work with the family to begin to plan what that might mean for the child. So at the summary assessment meeting, we take a person-centred planning approach and we ask questions to find out what the parent believes are the priorities for the child, what's going well for them, what might need to be improved, what outcomes would they like to see included in an education, health and care plan. And we use all of that information to begin to build the education, health and care plan as well. So very much their parents are building the foundations of what that final document is going to look like. Throughout the process, we offer parents the opportunity to provide their views in a standard format as well. So we have views forms, we send those out at different stages to make sure that parents are able to feed in. So sometimes parents find it quite difficult maybe to attend a summary assessment meeting. It can be a little bit overwhelming when there are a lot of people there, or they're maybe not as confident in sharing their opinions and views in a room full of people. So we do allow an opportunity for parents to tell us what they think in a different format. But those views forms as well really go back to the very beginning of the child's life. So they ask the parent, what was their child like growing up, developmentally, what experiences has the parent had with the child, and what has that meant for them as a family, really, so that we can understand the context and make sure that we offer whatever support is needed to the family as well. And we use as a team all of that information to draft the education, health and care plan. And at that stage, once we've got that draft plan, we share it with parents one final time to ask them whether or not they're happy with the content. And we do often get comments back with parents wanting to make some tweaks or make some changes, or with recommendations around how they might like things to be worded to suit them really and to reflect the child fully. And then once we've finalised in that plan and we're at the last stage of that 20-week assessment process, We ask parents for their preferences around school placement as well. And again, that's very much a co-produced part of the process. There's lots of information, advice and guidance provided to parents about what placements are available for their child, what might be suitable to meet the needs of their child, as we found out through the assessment process, and how then can we coordinate that to support those parents to have visits to those schools, to see what that provision looks like, so that they can make informed preferences. And it's that we then use to try and secure a placement for the child to meet their individual needs. So we just wanted to give you a bit of a case example around what that's meant for a particular family. And we've got a case study here, which is a family who were referred, a child was referred for an education, health and care plan. And really the process that I've just described was initiated from the very beginning. So the family and parents were engaged and included at the start of the process. They were able to share their views as part of the referral paperwork, and those assessments that I've just described were very much completed in partnership with the parents and with the young person as well. And I think it's important to add there that we do have views forms for children too. We encourage them to attend their meetings, and if a young person is 16 or over, it's the young person that we ask for their opinion on. So just to make sure there that we're clear, when I talk about parents and consultation and the process, it very much does centre around the children and young people too. So this parent was invited to the summary assessment meeting. We shared all of the information that we'd gleaned about the child through the assessment processes. And that meeting took place in school. So it was a convenient location for the parent and the family to attend, and a much more familiar and comfortable setting as well than maybe one of our council buildings or one of our civic campus locations. So we discussed the needs of the child, we discussed the parents' priorities, and those parents were able to feed directly into the EHCP at that point. And what was interesting about this particular case was, at the draft stage, once we'd actually written an education, health and care plan, it was redrafted several times based on feedback from the family. And I think at one point we even provided a Word copy of the document to the family so that parents were able to input directly into the section about their views and their understanding of the child, so that it was absolutely what they wanted and it reflected their views and their opinions completely. What we then undertook with this family was a lot of child-centred casework to support them to explore that provision, to look at what their child needed for their secondary school option. We went through a lot of information, advice and guidance, support for transition was provided, and we pulled together a family, a team around that family, multi-agency team around that family, to be able to make sure that the decisions they were making about the preference for their child's secondary provision was fully informed by all of the practitioners that had an involvement in that child's life. The child since started at a school which was the parents' first preference. He's happy and settled. But what's interesting is we're continuing to review his education, health and care plan and progress in partnership with parents. So that positive relationship that was fostered in the first 20 weeks of the assessment process has been able to continue. And we receive regular updates from the family, and the team have a really open and honest communication dialogue with them. So it's a real positive example of how, when we get co-production right at the start, that can then continue through a child's educational journey. So I'm going to pass you to Caroline now just to talk a little bit more about the impact. I think you're on mute, Caroline.
Apologies. Thanks, Emma. So in terms of the education, health and care plan process, I think I said at the beginning of the one of the slides, we set up a working group with our parents forum, Parents for Change, to really make sure that our process within Middlesbrough was robust, and that we could capture the views of our families, and that our process really supports families to understand the needs, what provision is available, the needs of the young person, and really ensure that the views of the families come through that whole process. So I think that's just important to say in terms of how we've developed that process. So we collect feedback on the Education, Health and Care Plan assessment from all our families who have gone through that process. And we have a consistent rate of 90% satisfaction from families in terms of that process. And we have put one quote here on the slide, but this quote is actually a quote that echoes a lot of families. So we didn't want to put the sort of same quote on the slides, but I've been given the opportunity to give my views, and these have been taken into account. Which I think is really important for us to know. And I think reflected alongside that is Middlesbrough has a very low tribunal rate in terms of the Education, Health and Care Plan process. I think we've had one since the start of the SEND reforms. We're one of the lowest in the country. There's just been a report published recently where it's saying that collectively local authorities have spent over 234 million pound dealing with SEND tribunals, which you know is a huge pressure in terms of budget. And I think our success rate in terms of low tribunals has been the process that's been set up in partnership with families to make sure that we have a transparent process, that we're able to share and hear the views of our families, for them to understand their rights in terms of the Education, Health and Care Plan process, the support that's available to them if they choose to place a child out of area, the impact of that in terms of the child, in terms of friendship, peer support, the impact on the family. So our families have all the information when they're making the decisions. And I think we just need to reflect that and reflect it back in terms of the work that we've done with our Parents Forum to get this particular process right. And when we had our local area inspection, it was noted within the report from Ofsted and CQC that families have a greater involvement in discussion and decision making about the child's needs and how best to support them. And the summary assessment meeting held as part of the Education, Health and Care Plan assessment process are valued by families, and that is a process that we've implemented in Middlesbrough. It's not a process that happens across all local authorities. And just finally, there's evidence of co-productions of the Education, Health and Care Plan process, which I think it's important for us just to recognise that, you know, it was identified within the local area inspection that there was good co-production around the Education, Health and Care Plan process for our families. So we're going to stop the presentation there because we have shared a lot of information around co-production within the report, also with the meeting with our Parents for Change in terms of how they're involved fully across the local area to share the views of other families and how they're involved in reshaping services, and really just wanted to give you a bit more information of the Education, Health and Care Plan process and how families and young people are fully involved in that process.
Okay, Caroline, thank you very much. I would like to open the floor up for questions. So what I'll do, in order of on the screen as I can see it, I shall go up the councillors who I can see on the screen. So, Councillor Story, have you any questions?
I don't, but I would like to thank them for the presentation. It was absolutely brilliant.
Okay, Councillor, moving up the line. Councillor Nugent? You're on mute. Councillor Nugent, you're on mute. You're still on mute. I'll come back to you. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's a good preparation there. That I quite enjoyed it. It shows a lot, and we're a bit more informed of what's going on in schools and things. So yeah, it's quite good. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Halawi?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation, Caroline. Yes, I was very interested to see that we have fewer cases going to tribunal than other areas in the country. So that's a real feather in our cap, isn't it, to be acknowledged. One of my questions was around what proportion of our children and young people have an education and healthcare plan in relation to all the rest of the children that are in education environments?
Caroline?
I need to get the proportion is very low, but I want to give you the right figure. So can I send that round? Because it's just there's been a significant increase in the number of children requiring an education, health and care plan. So if I can send, and that's, I think that has gone up significantly. So I will send round to everybody the latest figures.
Thank you. Chair, could I ask then, could we see what the figures were before they went up, you know, to see the proportion of increase and the impact of circumstances recently have had? Chair, could I ask another question on that then? So how many children might we have approximately going through this process at any one time? Because what it seems to me is, listening to what you've said and reading your report, Caroline, is that it's very staff intensive, isn't it? There are a lot of hours that need to be dedicated to this whole progress right across the multi-agency partners. And I'm quite, you know, surprised to think, well, I'm not surprised. I recognise how labour intensive this is from the expertise offered by the multi-agency partners. So I wonder how many children we can cope with at any one time going through the process.
Yeah. Well, I'll pass you in a second to Emma, who will tell you the latest figures that we have gone through the Education, Health and Care Plan process. We do have, you're quite right, it is very intensive in terms of the agencies who are involved across education, health and social care. We have seen a significant increase this year, and due to the increase in our sort of forecast increase, we have increased capacity within the team to support with the demand that's coming through. But Emma, do you want to just say what the current caseload is, or the overall figures for this month?
Yeah, so if I give you an example, since the start of the calendar year, we've had just over 250 referrals. Last year we had 180, so you can see that the increase in terms of just the referrals alone is significant for the team, which you're right, it is a lot of casework, it is a lot of pressure on services that have to contribute to that statutory assessment. At any one time, and at the moment, we've got around 80 referrals that are live, open to the team. But because it's a 20-week assessment process, those children can be anywhere in that 20-week assessment process at any one time. So some of those are new referrals that are brand new and have not yet been assessed and have not yet sort of had those meetings that we've just described. And others are nearing the end of the process. So I think the teams and all of the agencies working around those children have got a challenge to manage that at any one time. But at the moment, we're operating at about 80, which is significantly higher than we have been in previous years. We're fortunate that so far to date, we've been able to maintain good completion rates. So those families, even though we've seen an increase in referrals, have not had to wait longer than they should do for an education, health and care plan. But we are concerned that if the referrals continue, that is pressure on services. But that is a national picture as well. So we're not alone in that. Other local authorities are experiencing exactly the same challenges. And as a management team, we're constantly reviewing that to understand whether we need additional staff or, you know, need to build in additional capacity within our resources.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a couple more questions, Chair, but I'll ask them later. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. I'll go to Councillor Mawson. Councillor Mawson, have you any questions?
There's one question, one comment first. A very difficult area to work in, and congratulations to everyone involved in what is a success story that needs promoting to show how well we are working, or the staff are working on it. A comment I've got is, a question is, in your meeting there was a comment about bullet point about transport, difficulty getting transport. How are you trying to sort that problem out? Is there a way we Middlesbrough Council can help promoting it? Thanks, Chair.
Caroline, can you help?
Yeah. Sue, do you want me to answer this question? Or yeah. So yes, so there has been pressures on transport in terms of well, there's pressures due to COVID, significant pressures. So we have worked collectively. We've listened to the comments shared by our families, feedback from our Parents for Change Forum, who collect those comments from our families. Also, families contact the transport service directly, and we're working as a local authority, children's services with the transport team and the transport service to look at solutions to make sure that our children and people are getting the right support and the right transport at this difficult time. There are some real pressures in terms of transport being able to recruit drivers and have the right number of vehicles because of COVID, but we are doing a lot of work across the different directorates to ensure that our children and young people get the support that they need. So.
Thank you, Caroline. I mean, absolutely. I've been involved myself as director to try and support Caroline and Rob in resolving this issue. It isn't just COVID, it is actually Amazon have been soaking up drivers. And I know, for example, Borough Taxis have been looking for something like 300 drivers. So there have been some companies who have handed the routes back to us because they've not been able to fulfill their obligations. So it is a really tricky situation. I think it's certainly one for members to be aware of, and I certainly may at some point value. Well, I do value your support on this one. Maybe it might be a good idea to talk to you maybe separately about what you might be able to help to do. But certainly it's something that we're absolutely on to. The problem has, I think, lessened since the beginning of term, although there is a bit of a glitch at the moment around respite care and transporting children to their short breaks care, particularly at Glen Eagles, our respite facility. Yeah, but we are, we've had regular meetings with Jeff Field and his transport his transport head of service taking this forward, but I can't deny that it hasn't been an issue and remains something of an issue.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I'm a member of the licensing committee, and it, you know, Borough Taxis are trying to bring new rules in. And, that's on the agenda for next week. Trying to recruit more staff, and like I say, it doesn't help doing Amazon is soaking everybody up, and you know these guys are all self-employed, and there's no work out there when we're all in lockdowns. So we have a major problem. So I would imagine Jeff and his gang are really doing a hard job. I have a question actually before we go up. I'll nip back to Councillor Newton, and then I'll nip back to Councillor Lowy. Emma, you mentioned in the summary assessment, Councillor, in the summary assessment.
Yeah, I would just like to say thanks to Caroline. The presentation is marvellous. But I think it's excellent, the changes in how things have changed and how there's so many resources put in now to address the needs of the young people. And it's very hard work, and I hope it keeps up, that the resources are there, because it's marvellous what they're doing. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go back to my question, Emma. You mentioned in the summary assessment, you mentioned a lot of medical jargon, a lot of acronyms, etc. What people, you know, parents will be absolutely daunted with. Now, I don't know if it's possible, but could we have a blank or an edited version of a summary assessment we can have a look at to see what the type of thing people are actually facing when they've had this 20-week assessment, and when you go in and you say, oh, this is what we've got. You know, what, you know, I want to feel what they're trying to feel, to see if they're overwhelmed with it or if they understand it. I know you mentioned that it's the collaboration between the parents and yourselves, and it gets edited out several times before you come to the final plan. But I would like to see one, please, if that's possible. I don't know if anybody else would like to see one, but it's just something I would like to have a look at.
I can certainly ask, because the reports that are produced are owned by the different services that produce them. So we can certainly ask whether or not any of them can be anonymised and shared. That's an action we can take away from today. And I can share a copy of some anonymised minutes from a summary assessment meeting, which will give you a flavour around the person-centred planning and how that process works, in line with those assessments and reports as well. But one of the things that we are trying to do, and I think it's sort of pertinent to the question that you ask, is we're really trying at the moment through our quality assurance processes to make those plans and those documents as accessible as possible. So it sounds silly, but as services, we're calling each other out when we're using acronyms or using jargon. And there's a real push collectively to make sure that any description of needs or anything that we're sort of putting in these reports and in the education, health and care plans is accessible to families and children. So I can certainly share some for you, but I would hope that they are getting better as we go, and that is based on feedback from our families as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll look forward to that. Councillor Halawi, then we'll go to Councillor Hubbard.
Thank you, Chair. Could you remind everyone, please, about what we do to support families from diverse ethnic backgrounds, particularly related to certain cultural issues, understanding, SEND, and also language provision where we have obstacles? I know it's a minor point, but to me it's very important that everyone's included in our provision. Thank you.
Yeah, Emma, do you want to just take through the international arrival protocol and some of the work around that? Because I think that'll help shape the discussion.
Absolutely. I think before I describe that, it's just to say that we do employ translation services. We work really closely with the Ethnic Minority Achievement team as well to make sure that families, if there are language barriers or other issues, we absolutely try and understand what it is that's needed around those families. And we also make sure that those families are supported to access our impartial advice and guidance services as well if there are issues, so that they have complete equality of access to services. As Caroline said, there is an international new arrivals protocol that's in place at the moment, and that is for children who arrive in the UK with complex special educational needs, because as you can understand, we don't know anything about those children until they arrive here. There's a real push to be able to assess their needs quickly and get them into an appropriate school place so they've got access to education. And we've improved the timings around that recently to make sure that children are not waiting too long before they get school placements, and to work really closely with all of the agencies around those children, social care, health, and our ethnic minority achievement team, to make sure we understand the needs of the children and the family. And there's been some good examples recently of quite bespoke education packages being put in place for those children. And as part of that, we're in discussion with some of our local special schools to try and set up some assessment provision so that in the longer term, we'll have a really clear route for those children and young people and their families as well. But yeah, just to give you an example of that, really.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am very grateful for all that help, because I know sometimes it's quite challenging with the range of languages that we have and the range of understanding culturally around SEND. So I know that's sometimes quite a challenge, and I'm very grateful for all the support we get from all the teams involved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hubbard, you had a question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think it's clear to see by the report and the responses given today how vital this department is and all the extra work that's being committed. So thank you for that. I'd just like to know how the department absorb the extra case workloads that they have from 170 to 250. Do they employ more agency staff? And what budgetary pressures does this place on the service? Thank you, Chair.
Caroline?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So we're constantly looking at and planning in terms of the number of assessments that come through. So we have recently reshaped our service. We've restructured the service to ensure that we've planned for that additional pressure that's come through. That's not just within our SEND assessment team, but we've also looked at the pressure within our education psychology service. So our education psychologists support in terms of the education health and care plan process. And we have those discussions with our wider partners so that they're aware of the increasing demands, and they can see the increasing demands already on the service. So we do plan, and we tend to we don't employ agency staff. We have just gone out to recruit some fixed term posts to ensure that our children and young people are getting the support and the families getting the support quickly. In terms of budget pressures, yeah, it is a pressure, and it's a pressure on our high needs budget. to make sure that our support is in place for our young people, and we monitor that constantly, and we're in constant conversations with the Department for Education around our high needs budget. So there's pressures nationally around the high needs budget, and there's going to be some changes to the high needs budget formula. So that's all getting fed back into the national arena.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I have one more question, and then we'll go around the board again if need be. Caroline, you mentioned we've got a 90% assessment satisfaction rate. How does this compare nationally?
Well, nationally, there isn't a figure in terms of satisfaction around the education, health and care plan process. That's our figure. The figure that's held nationally is around the completion of the education, health and care plan process. So it's a 20-week process, and I think our current figure is about 98% completion rate of the 20-week process. Nationally, the figure is just below 60%. So we are much higher in terms of completing our education, health and care plan process, which means then that young people and the families are getting the support that they require quicker. But there is no national in terms of satisfaction around the process, because everybody would be collecting that data differently.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sounds good to me. Thanks a lot. Has anybody else got any more questions, please, before we move on? Councillor Lowy?
Yeah, it was just, thank you, Chair. It was about the relationship or the working process in co-partnership between the local authority SEND department and the academies. What responsibility do the academies have, and how do we work with them within their framework of responsibility?
So this links back probably to the first report that we shared around the SEND Code of Practice. So all settings, all schools, early year settings, schools, post-16, they all have responsibilities in terms of the SEND Code of Practice. So there's no difference there whether it's an academy or not. And alongside that, they have to work within the Ofsted framework for the schools and in relation to SEND. Does that answer your question? We work with our academies the same way that we work with all of our settings, exactly the same, providing the support that they might require in terms of meeting the needs of children and people with special educational needs, and as well as give them the same challenge that we would give any other setting in terms of meeting the needs of children with special educational needs.
Thank you. Chair, my question was a bit, yes, thanks, Caroline, that answers it in part. But my question was about the other way around, really. How do the academies take any more responsibility, potentially, if that's what they have to do, for SEND children?
We do have a number of, we do have good partnerships with our academies, and we have a number of specialist resource provision within our some of our academies. So Emma, do you want to list, I think that we had a recent one set up last year, didn't we, with one of our major academy chains?
Yeah, we did, and I think that Caroline's right. We work with all schools equally, but we actually have some academies in the town that have been very forthcoming in supporting us to build additional resource bases. And we've got an academy opening up as a new school. You'll be aware of the Build on the Nature's World site, and their academy chains that are actually working with us as part of our SEND development work. So it is equal, local authority maintained or academy, it is the same experiences, but we do have some very strong academies in the local area who are very good at meeting the needs of children with SEND as well, and very committed to our local area priorities.
Thank you, Chair. That's what I was hoping to hear. I was hoping that all of them would be very, very committed to our provision, but thank you. I'm pleased to know that some of them are, and it's interesting that some are more than others, actually. But thank you. That answers the question, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Caroline, would you like to give us a quick brief on the meeting myself and the Vice Chair had with the Parents for Change, please?
Yeah, so at the meeting with Parents for Change, we met to just talk about the range of things that the Parents for Change have sort of taken the lead on in terms of co-production. We talked about how they've been involved in they talked about how they've been involved in the local offer and reshaping the local offer. They also talked about the work around their new newsletter, that we've worked in partnership with them to support them in terms of the development of the newsletter. They shared the work around the Preparing for Adulthood work stream and how they've helped to reshape some of the post-16 provision. They also talked around the work that they've been involved in the early years provision and support around early years provision. The Parents for Change also talked around the work that they've been involved in terms of training and supporting other families in terms of the training. They did talk about some of the challenges, and one of the particular challenges at the moment is transport and the impact that that's having on some of the families across the local area. They talked around the work that they're doing in terms of trying to engage more parents to become members of Parents for Change, to improve and further improve some of the developments across the local area. And I think they talked about some of the difficulties that they have in getting families involved in becoming members. They shared information about the Facebook page, which I know some from Scrutiny panel actually went onto the Facebook page during the meeting to look at the information that was shared there. And I think we sort of finished off the meeting, we were talking about the recognition that we had given, that Parents for Change have within the local area, but also that we had nominated them as a local area to be taken forward. I think it was for a community award with the royal family. So they went down for a garden party in London pre-COVID to accept their award for the work that they had done within the community. So we had put them forward as a local area, as just a recognition for all the hard work that they've done to support our families across Middlesbrough.
Thank you, Caroline. Has anybody got any questions? I'll start with Councillor Morstan.
Oh, thanks very much, Chair. No, just congratulations on everything that's been done. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Story.
No, I think that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nugent. Take that as a no. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the back of what Councillor Flower said. SEN students, the increase in SEN students, how are the academies coping with the increase in SEN students? Do we know that?
I think all settings are finding it difficult in terms of the increase of children, young people with special educational needs, particularly the significant increase as we've seen as a result of COVID. They're working very closely with ourselves to through the implementation of our new inclusion model, which we spoke about at last year's Scrutiny panel when we were talking about attendance and behaviour. We shared that we had developed an inclusion model. We further enhanced that inclusion model, and that enhanced model will be fully implemented in January this year. So that model will be helping as well in terms of making sure the right support is in place for our children and people across the local area. So it's a pressure on everybody, which collectively we're looking at solutions to ensure that our young people are getting the right support at the right time.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carolyn. Councillor Lowy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm really impressed by the Parents for Change information and setup. I just think it's really important, and I'm sure you're aware too, I'd like to encourage that we get as wide as possible representation of the different parent groups within that Parents for Change community. And we do need to strive, don't we, to be totally inclusive and have everyone on board that we possibly can. So thank you very much for all you've done so far, and good luck in the future to expanding the inclusion of more and more parents in the offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hubbard, have you a question?
No questions, Chair. Just a comment. I attended an event by Children for Change. It was around 8 years ago at the Riverside Stadium. I was very impressed with everything that they do. So well done to the council working in partnership with them, because they are an excellent organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, yes, I was very impressed with it. We were, by the way, myself and the Vice Chair were invited as guests to this meeting, and it was at the end of their normal meeting. So it was just to give us an overview of how things went and everything. And I was very impressed, and I look forward to seeing them again in another meeting in the new year. Moving along on the agenda, we'll go to item number 5, COVID recovery education. Could we have an update on that, please, Sue? Stroke Rob.
If I can provide that update.
Chair,
Chair.
I've asked Rob to do this as he's just come out of a meeting with head teachers, so we'll have the most up-to-date information.
Thank you, Sue. Carry on, Rob.
Hi. So, as we all heard from the Prime Minister addressing the nation last night, there's a preparation for, I think did he describe it as a tsunami or a tidal wave of Omicron? That takes us away from, and I know this header is around recovery, but this takes us away from recovery into more of a COVID response. So the meetings that we're having this week with head teachers and the meeting that I've just come from with secondary head teachers is around how we prepare for another peak, if you like. So another wave of COVID this time, it's because of the new variant driving that demand. But we've got to look at what that means for schools. Clearly, there's a broader impact across the community, and that's picked up and scrutinised in different forums. But if we look at the purpose of our forum or our scrutiny panel, it's the disruption to education and the oversight of those vulnerable children when their education is disrupted. So have we got eyes on the child, and can we keep them in learning, in whether it be in classroom, which is clearly the best, or via remote learning, and ensure that's of high quality. So we've been having quite a few meetings in communication with schools over the last couple of weeks, but it's starting to increase in pace. We've got schools describing significant staff absences, and that's starting to result in partial closures, so closure of year groups, etc. So we'll then communicate with schools to ensure that the vulnerable children are, we know their whereabouts and they can access school, they can access learning, etc. And trying to minimise all of the disruption till we can limp into Christmas, which is now just days away for school holidays. So if we can get to the end of the school, or beginning of the school holidays, sorry, the end of term, then we can go into what's previously been described as a fire break, and that'll give a little bit of respite and allow schools to do that planning around what January return looks like. January return, we've already had a communication sent to schools from ourselves and Public Health, a joint letter, which was outlining a range of control measures, and we discussed a little bit of that in previous scrutiny panels. But in essence, things on the cards are around more frequent testing, the wearing of masks, and that's since we sent that letter, government have issued guidance on mask wearing, etc. There's also things around bubbles and the cancelling of unnecessary, or maybe not unnecessary is the wrong word, cancelling of events that may increase the risk of transmission, I suppose is a fairer way of describing it. So we're in planning mode, very much in planning mode. We'll be focusing on ensuring regular testing of students and the vaccine uptake of students where eligible, and also of staff, and that's in the first, the second, and the booster. And also messaging to parents around the behaviour when in groups. So if coming near the school site, not congregating in large groups, observing social distancing, wearing masks, could be described as kind of the common courtesy that's starting to be established during COVID. So for us, it's kind of back to that stage that we were at earlier in the year, where we're preparing for the impact and the disruption that's inevitable from a significant wave of transmission coming into the area.
Okay, Rob, thanks a lot. Has anybody got any questions? Right, okay. Councillor Halawi?
Thank you, Chair. What I think is disconcerting, Rob, in terms of the new regulations, is that for our parents in the community, where, for example, there are 2 schools, some schools are going ahead with Christmas performances, nativity plays, etc. Other schools have closed them all down. And I think that's causing quite a lot of upset, really, within certain communities, that they feel, well, the school down there, they've got everything on full tilt, and we can't even go and see our little child being a donkey, And I think that's really sad for parents, that they've got to face this, what they see as unfair treatment according to which school you're in and which school your child goes to, obviously.
We were in a meeting this morning to try and agree a consensus with secondaries, and we'll be doing the same amongst the broader, as in primary specials, the broader sector later in the week. It is a bit like that, I suppose, because it's just at the beginning of the rapid increase. Now, things have changed quite significantly since last week, and the week before this wasn't even kind of getting discussed really in any great deal. So we're right at the beginning of that, but it hits the peak season for visitors into schools, doesn't it? Because of nativity plays, carol service, etc., the Christmas parties, the dinners, everything that happens within schools. So we're just trying to find the common ground on this issue. Karen, I saw you raise your hand there. Is that in relation to this point?
Yes, I was just.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to add that obviously public health teams are working with schools around needs. So obviously one school or neighbouring schools might have different caseloads than the other, hence the changes to some of the Christmas arrangements. What we are finding is staff absence in some schools is more significant than others, and that naturally then makes the risk assessment process a little bit more stringent in some than others, and unfortunately that's just the way the inconsistency of COVID has meant that school leaders are making these decisions, unfortunately.
And I think a very valid point, Councillor, that you know we've got a slight disparity right now. If you kind of take a poll across all our schools, it comes from the back of there was national guidance, and that set a really clear parameters of operation. But as infections started to the numbers started to wane, then we started dealing with it on a case by case basis. But now we're seeing the uptick, and it's starting to go back. We're waiting for that national guidance, but we can't wait because it's happening now. The disruption's live, so we're trying to blend that out now and get the kind of uniformed approach. But just as we'll get this, it'll hit Christmas, so we're really looking at kind of that 3 weeks time. So looking at January return and trying to get that consensus, because it's inevitable. There'll be some guidance issued, but it's going to happen, you know, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve kind of thing. So let's try and get that planning done with schools now.
Could I just add then, if in terms of national guidance coming through subsequently after Christmas, let's say on such issues, is it possible that we could get an early consensus amongst our schools for things, activities?
That's exactly right, yeah.
I think we need to do that early, even in advance of guidance, so that we can try and have some, you know, coherence across the whole patch, so that all our parents feel they've got fair treatment. Because I take your point, Karen, about staff absence and different scenarios, but parents aren't aware of all that, and they're not really too bothered about that. They just want, you know, the fair deal with the school down the road. And so I think that's what caused, you know, could cause some disruption within school communities, that they feel that they're, you know, I'd just like it to be smoother and more coherent across the patch. And if we could get onto it earlier, I don't know what pressure we can put on because it's guidance from the government, but it would be good if we had some equality of provision, really.
And that's exactly what we're seeking to do, to try and get that kind of agreement. And it's by consensus because of the nature of academies and their kind of management line. It goes to DFE rather than direct through the local authority. So we're just trying to kind of agree some common ground. Having said that, and it is reading of the tea leaves, but we anticipate guidance coming because we anticipate that there's going to be a change in terms of a significant uptick in the rate of infection, etc., and therefore there'll be a response to that. But it's a bit of a finger in the air at the moment because we're trying to imagine what it'll look like 3 weeks from now with the socialization that takes place around Christmas and New Year with in the community. So we'll hopefully agree something over this week in terms of the things on offer. But thankfully, January looks a little different to December within a school in terms of visitors coming into a school site. So we should be able to agree some things that are a bit easier than kind of a cancelling of a nativity, etc.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you,
Rob.
Chair. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Karen.
Okay, Councillor. Councillor Mawson, you had a question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. A large number of pupils at Nunthorpe Academy are from Middlesbrough. The information you were given to Middlesbrough schools, is it the same as being given to Redcliffe Cleveland schools? I did have another question, but would have given some publicity to a certain group that I'd rather not have it. Thanks, Chair.
So, Councillor, we've got communication with Nunthorpe, but as you've said, it's a Redcliffe Cleveland school, so they're included in the Redcliffe Cleveland network and communications and advice from their public health. Thankfully, their public health is our public health because it's a joint service. So the messaging's the same, but it probably comes via it definitely comes via a different route, and it might have a very slightly different flavour to it, but it's ultimately the same advice.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Wilson, did you indicate you had a question? Okay, has anybody else got any questions? Councillor Story, I can't see you, so I'm asking.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Story. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda, update from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I wasn't in attendance at the meeting. I was on holiday. I believe Councillor Mason stood in for me and gave an update. It's disappointing Councillor Mason isn't here today. He could have given us a bit of an update. So, Chair, I can't give you any update on that. So, oh yes, he is here. Oh, thank you, Councillor Mason. Would you like to give an update?
Yeah,
I didn't see you there.
I'm in York at the moment, and I could not get my computer to connect through the VPN, so I've been following on YouTube, and I've only just this second managed to get in. Literally, there's not much to update regarding the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Really, we had a meeting the other day, and I updated them on the parents for change that we've been through recently. But apart from that, there's nothing further to update, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason, for the hard work and the diligence of trying to get through. Thank you very much. Sorry, I muted myself. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda. Has anybody got anything else they would like to bring up? Councillor Lowe, you've got your hand up?
Yes, it's just to acknowledge the change in the provision for schools of the Governor Services Support Network. And so we are losing that now from Middlesbrough. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone involved. We've had some wonderful, wonderful support from the team of Governor Services in all of our schools. I can't say how hugely grateful we are for that support. And we're going into a new era now, so we hope that will work well too. But a huge thanks to everyone concerned. I'd like it to be minuted, and I'd like Karen or Rob, if you can please, to transfer our thanks to all those people who are changing jobs, etc. in the coming days. So huge thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nugent?
Yeah, could I just support Alma in saying a special thanks to the team as well for the support we have received as governors over the years from the team in Middlesbrough, and just a special thanks. Okay.
Thank you very much. Can you pass the thanks on, please, to all concerned? Right. Okay. The next meeting will be on Monday, the 17th of January, same time, same place, same channel. And at that, I would like to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. And be safe out there.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye,
Chair.
everyone.